So, welcome. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation. And because as I'm growing in my profession as an esthetician, I want to do more about educating people about the importance of self care. So I always look to professionals that I can talk to, learn from, have conversations with, and who are aligned to mental health awareness and well-being of any kind, and just see what conversation or what they can teach or what they can bring to the table as terms of how we can better help others, and especially in this time. And I'm not gonna. I was gonna do the introductions, but people know this is my stuff, so they know who I am. I want. Can you please just introduce yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I love the topic of self-care. I'm so excited to talk about it. My name is Lindsay Mitchell, and my background is medicine. So I'm a trained physician assistant. But about 3.5 years ago, I got involved in this world of neuroplasticity, which just basically means the brain changes all the time. And what I help to do is I work with people who have chronic symptoms, chronic conditions, pain, fatigue, anxiety, hypervigilance, or sensitivities. And I work with them to calm the autonomic nervous system's fight, flight, and freeze response. So this is often turned on in people who have chronic conditions like fibromyalgia or chronic pain, or even people who have undergone chemotherapy after having cancer. And their nervous systems can be stuck in this state of fight, flight, and freeze. And so what I do is actually a form of self-care because it helps to reset that sympathetic dominant or fight, flight, and freeze response so that we can access our natural, resilient, natural healing properties when we are in the parasympathetic dominant or growth and repair response. So what I do is help people kind of balance those two out. And, had my own personal story of using these techniques and making a recovery from Lyme disease, which is something that, a lot of people don't hear, is that I've recovered from Lyme disease. A lot of times it's a lifetime thing. And I know for me, going through that diagnosis of Lyme disease, having that sympathetic dominant response on and shifting that back into parasympathetic growth and repair was a huge part of my healing journey. So it's just been really cool to use these same techniques and teach them to people with chronic illnesses in my company, Vital Side.
Okay. All right, thank you. Can you just, because I'm really interested. I was looking at their site and I know that you do a lot of videos, and I hear also that there are tools for neuroplasticity. What were some of the tools that you use personally to help you do? Can you explain a little bit more in detail just so that we can get a real understanding of how this works?
Yeah, it can seem a little bit weird to just say, oh, our brains change. What does that mean? But the thing about it is we're changing our brains all the time. Lashelle, with the people that you work with and teaching people about how to practice proper self-care techniques when it comes to hydrating their face, these types of things, that actual process of sitting down and using that moisturizer or exfoliating in that way is a form of changing your brain because we're prioritizing different information in that moment. And so we're releasing feel-good neurochemicals, things like oxytocin and serotonin, when we actually do that motion and prioritize ourselves. So it's kind of the same thing when you're dealing with that sympathetic dominant response, or I'll call it the survival response, because it turns on when our brains sense that we're in danger. And we're just simply focused on surviving. How the heck do I get out of this dangerous environment? So it's the same response that turns on if we walk outside and we see a 500-pound grizzly bear standing there, and you're like, I'm in LA. How in the world is this grizzly bear here? Right. But it's going to eat me. And
right.
To get into that response is, of course, necessary so that we can run away. How do I get out of here? How do I stay and fight if you're brave and you want to fight the grizzly bear, or freeze up and kind of shrivel down or play dead even? So all natural survival responses. But when we have a chronic illness, we can get stuck in that survival response, like that bear is hanging out with us 24/7. And it's like, hey, Lashelle, what's up? I'm here. And of course you're going to remain in that response, that, sympathetic dominant survival response. So what we do in Vital Side is actually break the habit of being in that response. So I know you talk quite a bit about habit formation and how to include little tiny things throughout your day to make these long-lasting changes. And it's the same idea here. That's, your brain retraining. That's what you're doing.
Exactly. What I'm hearing from you is, and I'm so glad, this is one of the real reasons why I wanted to have this conversation, is because you're articulating in a more in-depth way the same things that I've been saying. Like we just said this, you're putting it into words that are sort of crystal clear for people to truly understand what it is that even what I do, and why I stress the importance of creating a habit forming routine, right? Because it changes the mind. Well, going back to something you said, I'm learning so much about what you do, and I don't want to compare it to Reiki or anything like that, but so let me just go back. So what I'm understanding is, when we go through trauma, fight or flight, things of that nature, our body holds a certain memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really holds that memory, that trauma, where it's in the body. I mean, think about how stress really reflects on the body. Like, for instance, I just went to the chiropractor, and she had to do all her work on me. And she was like, wow, you're really holding a lot of things in. And just her opening me up was a release of that. And so what I'm hearing from you is that you really get down to the ancillary, the detail of how to walk people, show them where it's at, and then walk them, how to walk them out of it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. And that's a great comparison, because perhaps what your chiropractor was doing, and maybe what she's trained in doing, is a passive form of neuroplasticity. So, neuro meaning the brain and, the spinal cord and your nervous system, right? And so when she's doing these different movements, that's a passive form of neuroplasticity. And she can help to shift your body into that parasympathetic growth and repair response. And so what I do is a form of active neuroplasticity. So I like to think of it as like an empowering way to make positive changes to your brain that are intentional, that are focused on finding relief from chronic symptoms. Because we think of something like pain, and pain is a warning signal from the brain that shows up in the body and says, hey, something is wrong. We need to do something about this. So a lot of times we'll address the part of our body with the pain, what's going on, what's happening. But if we think about it as, in terms of maybe root cause medicine, we think, okay, pain is that warning signal from the brain. How can we make sure this isn't an acute issue, first of all, right? Rule that out. And then if it's not, being able to say, okay, my brain is responding in pain. How can I shift that, knowing that it starts in the brain? So what I do is I teach people the science behind being stuck in that state of sympathetic dominance or that survival response. And I teach them active neuroplasticity, ways to make positive changes to their brains every day through things like mental exercise. Structured mental exercises to complete may kind of look like a guided meditation or visualization. But what you're doing is you're using specific language, specific body movement, even the way that you talk and hold yourself are all intentional to shift out of this sympathetic dominant response. So a quick example of that is grizzly bear standing there. I know the thing that I would do is, oh my God, there's a grizzly bear. And my shoulders kind of,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like this scrunch, like all of a sudden I like close up, and I have seen a bear in real life, but I was in a car. So it was a little bit different. I was like, oh, a sweet bear, I'm protected. As opposed to a grizzly bear where I would see that on my doorstep and be like, oh, what's happening? And so you think of doing something as simple as, let me put my shoulders back. Let me kind of sit up. How do I be empowered and feel powerful in this moment? So it's easy to kind of just talk about in this sort of arbitrary way. But what I teach is a structured protocol for people who are stuck in this response and have been diagnosed with a chronic condition. So
Lindsay, I mean, first of all, I'm smiling because
I love your smile.
You don't understand, like, I'm not a mental health therapist. What I do is provide beauty therapy. And one of the reasons why I love doing what I do is because I love people first. And I recognized very long on what impact this has on people. And I started out as a makeup artist, and so that did one thing. But when skin treatments are so much more personal and I get to put my hands on people, it's just something that I try to teach, especially men. So let me just go into this. How does what you do and what you teach correlate to what I do in the treatment room? And can you put it into easier terms, though, so that I can explain better to my clients, more or less my male clients? Because I think women, and I'll get to that question later, understand what I do differently, and they understand the therapeutic benefits from it. They understand the psychological benefits from it, and they understand the actionable steps, the effects of it. God. So reason why I wanted to do this is because I'm always trying to create a conversation so that I can have more men to understand it. Can you help put it into some simplified terms as to what it is to go see a practitioner, first of all, because most men don't even go to the doctor. I say this all the time. So I'm sort of their first step. Going to their barber is their first step, initial step of taking care of themselves. And then hopefully we are the ones to invite the conversation to other forms of therapy if they need that for themselves. So can you help put that into some simpler terms?
Sure. So what's helpful is to reframe what's going on here. I think a lot of times, so men and women, their brains are not so different, but a lot of times it's our conditioning with what has happened, what we've been told as kids, what we haven't been told as kids, past experiences, evidence that shows up in our lives, influencers that we have in our lives, meaning friends, family members, people we're in direct contact with or surrounding ourselves with. So a lot of times that's the factor in this. So when you think about going and seeking advice, whether it's for kind of self-care and taking care of your skin, which, by the way, is the largest organ. So, of course, we need to take care of it and treat it like an organ.
First line of defense.
Which what?
It's the first line of defense. It's with you longer than everything else. So, yeah. So
if we start, but I mean, that's a good point, because if we start to think about things in a little bit different of terms, first line of defense, largest organ of the body, we think about how we take care of ourselves in a day-to-day routine way. So we think of a habit that maybe we already have. A lot of men generally have some sort of workout routine that they like to do. Why? Because they move their bodies, you release endorphins, dopamine, which are all feel-good neurochemicals, help with general well-being and mood boosting, but also keep your immune system running and make it more likely for you to access the parasympathetic growth and repair response, where you feel less stressed out, more at ease. You can focus on getting blood flow to the most important parts of your body. So this is post-exercise. But they generally get, used to having that routine for that reward, which is the release of those neurochemicals. Okay. And so if we start to think, men especially, women tend to think of taking care, and maybe this is a generalization. I haven't studied this quite myself, but I know just working with my female clients tend to think of taking care of themselves and their skin, or, just the way that, you treat yourself to a facial as sort of an indulgence.
Yeah.
So, and that can be fun, right? And that can be exciting, and that can release dopamine before you actually go to the event and go get that procedure done, or, go get that moisturizer, whatever it is that you're doing, even doing it yourself. And so, whereas men may not see it in that indulgence way, and maybe they don't see it in a way that is going to boost their dopamine and oxytocin and endorphins in the way that maybe exercise would. So what we start to do, and one way to start to kind of do this or think about it is to reframe this process of going and taking care of your body and your skin in this way as something with the reward of these feel-good neurochemicals. So it's just one step closer to getting your mood boosted, increasing your immune system functioning, having all these positive effects on you, just like a workout would. So a lot of times to create this habit, especially for men, is to tack on a routine after something that you already like doing that is already a routine. So for example, exercising, adding it to the last leg of the exercise routine, and in the gym, being able to introduce a new skincare product. And actually the ability to sit there and massage into your face, even if it's for a minute, that act of massaging and paying attention to yourself, maybe even, taking a few deep breaths in that moment, just organically, these types of things will all play into those increase of those feel-good neurochemicals. Breathing, deep breathing, especially if you kind of feel your belly moving in and out, that can help to stimulate the vagus nerve, which can help send a message to that parasympathetic growth and repair response to get activated. And again, that's going to help you achieve optimal health. So there's all these ways to think about it. So being able to even think about it in this way where I'm not just doing it as an indulgence, right, or as something that is maybe an afterthought, maybe something that's not quite necessary. I'm taking care of myself, yes, but just like I would go see a doctor or go work out and move my body, because I think most of us know if we stay lethargic and we don't move our bodies, even for a month, we start to lose muscle tone. We start to feel a little bit lousy. We, start to breathe heavier when we walk up the stairs, these types of things that happen. Well, and you can speak to this more than I can. The same kind of thing happens to your skin. You're not taking care of yourself in that way. Mm-hmm. So we can reframe it in a way that's like, gets us going, motivates us, and tacking it onto something that we already really like to do or is already a routine.
Well, that's one of the things. It's funny you brought in the gym. I always say that, you exercise your muscle, especially when I try to it's one thing for them to come and get get the treatment and leave and do nothing at home. But the thing that I want them to do is get in the habit of home routines, because it puts them in actionable steps. And I say to them, if you go to the gym, it takes time for your muscles to build and grow. It's the same with your skin health and skin integrity. So I'm glad that you brought that parable in, because that's something that I always educate them on, and hopefully get them to see a different perspective on how to approach it. Because with men, the indulgence thing feels self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they need things that feel they need to have practicality to it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to understand what's the result. Why am I putting this effort in? Not that they won't do it. They're more logical when it comes to things like that. Mm-hmm. And so you just explaining that and just elaborating on it, I'm thankful, because it's something that I already say, but now you're putting some real back terminology to it, some strong terminology to it that helps. I want to ask a question. You mentioned that men and women they're pretty much not different in certain ways, but what are some of the misconceptions that you run into with men and women, and in terms of this particular type of work, in terms of self-care, in terms of getting them to understand how the brain and the body works and moves? What are some of the...
So you're asking, like, what are the kind of differences?
Yeah, the differences. The differences. Like, do you run into any obstacles with men and women, or are they really are both just really open to this?
Yeah. It's such an interesting question, and still something that, is a learning day by day process for me. I think one of the major differences that I see is the differences in motivation. So we always want to determine that reward in order to create a habit, right? There are three kind of parts to a habit formation. There is the cue, which happens right before the actual habit takes place. There's the routine, and then there's the reward. And so typically that reward, it can be a feeling that you get afterwards, that neurochemistry of the dopamine rush, or the serotonin or the oxytocin that you get after giving somebody a hug. These types of things can be rewards, maybe a way that someone makes you feel or something makes you feel, just general types of rewards. And so those three parts make up a habit, and that habit loop. And so defining those three parts is really important. And it's something that I strive to do with each individual client that I work with. And gosh, men and women are different, yes, but every individual is so different. So even just talking with someone before we start working together and asking them specific questions that help me to define their learning style. I think a lot of times, I think more men than they know are visual learners or are kinesthetic learners. In kinesthetic, you can think about like the feels, the kind of hands-on learner. And maybe that's not something that they've ever identified before. But I think understanding the different motivations between men and women. Maybe a common one that I kind of work with is sometimes women more likely want to experience a feeling of calm, relaxation, ease, safety. And I see that in a lot of my male clients as well. But a lot of times, and whether this is from the male or from conditioning, men want more activity. And they want to go back to work. They want to do the thing that they haven't done before. They want to go. They're kind of energized.
Can I jump in? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
I think you just hit it. And I was going to ask this question. And the conditioning, you just said it. Women tend to, I think, because women are more connected to their emotions, and men are more physical, and that's how they connect. That's how they express their emotions, but it necessarily doesn't always mean that they're connected to their emotions. Mm-hmm. Because I run into that issue too. It works for me in two different ways, where it's always apprehensive to get them into the treatment room. And I'm talking about just a basic facial, hey, you need to relax, let's say, you just need to relax and just want to kind of get you kind of introduced to this sort of regimen. And then, they're kind of apprehensive a little bit. And I know that's that emotional response, but I don't know, once I get them in the treatment room and get them on the bed and I start putting my hands on them, they understand the benefit of it. They don't mind it. It's just, I don't think that they can really get past that conditioning. How do you speak? And I think that's the real important here. That's a real important question here, is the conditioning. And I think that's what you really deal with. Am I right? On some level, it's reconditioning.
Yeah.
And I know I'm asking probably a question that's probably pretty broad, but if we can just bring it down to now, I think it's really about that emotional conditioning to men. How do we approach that now? Because I think more men are wanting to look into wellness, well-being, coming to get skin treatments, coming to see someone about their traumatic experience. I know that you deal with anxiety. I know that you deal with stress, amongst other things. Even now, I am also trained as a licensed oncologist skin therapist, and I work at the Towers Cancer Research Center in Beverly Hills, but predominantly our clients are women. We offer many things for men. They still won't even come in. Men who have been treated with cancer, who are survivors of cancer and still are being in treatment, we have things there for them, and they're not coming through the door. And I think it's because of the conditioning. I've probably asked this question before, but how can you talk to that? And what can we do as professionals to meet them where they are, to help them see a different perspective?
Sure. And there's a couple things that you can do, and a couple approaches that I take for different men. So men in general, they are so different, right? Each individual is just so different. And so there is the approach that you can take of let me first say men and women may have similar brain structures, but they have different hormonal regulation. So that's a different one. So where men are more likely to have their testosterone higher, right? Women also have testosterone, but a little bit different. We have progesterone and estrogen that is higher in women. So our hormones are very different. So if you can meet a man who wants to do the thing, wants to be in the next step and move, and work with them to reach those goals. So for example, men who have been through cancer treatment often have a very low testosterone, and it feels disempowering and stressful. And so working with that man to say, okay, well, let's start to learn how to regulate that and get energized to do that. And although practicing self-care isn't going to directly increase the testosterone, it can be a step in the right direction, because more self-care can mean better habits, and better habits can be creating a slow, gentle exercise practice, and creating a slow, gentle exercise practice can mean starting to regulate your hormones again naturally. And so it's this indirect process. That's one way to think about it. And something else is to, because we are conditioned in different ways and we're told different things as kids. And unfortunately, no matter how kind of progressive and proactive we are in 2020, we still have these male-female kind of stigmas that we take with us, and we need to decondition. And we're learning to do that as we, become adults and live. And something else that can be effective to help kind of decondition that general maybe anxiety around practicing something like self-care can be introducing it at home where it's safe. And a lot of men may think, I want to do this. I want to feel good and like maybe look a little bit better, but maybe it's some ideas that society has thrown their way that says, no, 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 that's not for you. So if you can, even before you meet with them, have them, take a phone call at home, somewhere where they feel safe, maybe in their home office, and do something quickly that just takes about a minute to help shift into that maybe relaxation or growth and repair response where they feel a little bit more relaxed. It's not something that is uncomfortable. Somebody else touching me, this isn't right. Something that they can do is, simply put, your hands over your heart like this and take 3 breaths in and for 3 seconds, and then exhale for 6 seconds, twice as long. And even doing that for a minute, inhaling for 3 seconds, exhaling for 6 seconds, all of a sudden you're starting to connect with that growth and repair response. You have touch on you, even if it's your hands, it's a safe thing to do, and you feel more relaxed. And so being able to kind of get into that response before going and doing something that's maybe out of your comfort zone can just generally make you feel more safe. Because at the same time, men who have never done this before and conditioning has happened and they go and, they get touched, it doesn't feel right? It doesn't feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so even being able to do that in the waiting room or in the car before you go inside can help to just recalibrate your nervous system in a little way to help you say, or your nervous system to think this is safe. I'm okay. What we're doing is okay. So you're starting to decondition that previous conditioning. And then I think the more they talk to you and they understand what's going on here and how this is a necessity to have the aging process run smoothly and, feel good, and then connecting with that over time can be a process. It takes time to recondition, but it can happen over time.
I have to say, I have to admit that I'm listening to you and I thought about myself. I've been in this industry for a very long time, and I really enjoy putting my hands on people and working with people in that way. But for me personally, and I like to think, I thought that I was really in touch with a lot of my emotional sides, but it was in reverse. I was giving to everyone else and not. So when it was time for me to do those breathing exercises, I'm very open about my recovery. And when I was working with my sponsor, because I'm such a fast-paced person, he says, you need to learn to breathe. Now, him telling me that in theory, I just didn't see I didn't think any benefits can really come out of that. It took me a very long time to take his suggestions and to apply it. And even then, it took me some time after doing it for it to start to make sense to me, to open the door to bring more. What I needed was a stopping and being still and calming my mind, so that I can get more clarity, so that I can bring more well-being in, because my head was just going crazy. So I'm listening to you say that, and it was a challenge for me. So I can almost just imagine what it must be for other men to connect with themselves like that. It was so hard for me to connect with myself like that. Just on an everyday basis. I do want to say what I understand too is most men won't really do these sort of exercises unless their back is against the wall, like they've been through cancer or something life-threatening. And what I like to do with my skincare routine is the introduction to normalize what we just talked about, bringing something in that's more for your well-being and wellness, and then everything else will apply. I'm sorry. I don't want to repeat the question. So I don't know. You just gave me a lot of food for thought with how to approach men differently. You actually definitely affirm some of the things that I was already saying. So I appreciate that. But now I want to ask a little bit more about you. So I know that you're doing all of this. What do you do? Because now that you're giving all of this love to other people and education to other people and helping them with themselves, what does Lindsay do in terms of her own self-care? What does Lindsay do in terms of her, especially when it comes to skin treatments? And the reason why I go back to skin treatments, because for me, it's more than just a relaxing facial. This is really about, and I have to say this because you told me about this word and I love it. This is lifestyle medicine. Talk about lifestyle medicine for a minute, Lindsay, and why it's important right now in the times that we're in.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I just get goosebumps when you say that. I'm like, yes, that's life.
I love that you said that word. I've been saying it since then. But I got it from Lindsay. I want you to talk a little bit about that and why what we're doing right now is very important.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. And y'all have seen firsthand what it looks like when life happens and we feel out of control. And having lived through 2020, though before 2020, we can think like, oh yeah, we don't always have control and uncertainty happens and life happens. And yeah, things have happened over time, but 2020, we're getting hit left, right, and center.
Right into our faces. What it did was it forced us to stop in a way that we could not control. And everyone was faced with the fact that you now have to look inwardly and now have to do things to take care of yourself. I just did a class, Lindsay, about 2 weeks ago online. This would have never happened a year ago, with parents who are home with their children and needed to learn self-care and how can they bring self-care into their homes. And obviously I use skincare, talking about some of the same things we're doing. And I introduced lifestyle medicine. So please elaborate.
Yes, I love it. Yeah. And like, here's the thing is that none of us are perfect. You know, lifestyle medicine looks different for every single person. But when things happen that are unexpected, we've got, again, conditioned coping mechanisms that become, are like our go-tos from things that have maybe happened in the past or help us to stay, feel like we're grounded, whether that's eating comforting food or watching reality TV or the vices, that people talk about and turning to those things. So what I had to do very quickly was say, okay, I need to recalibrate, because the one thing that we can control is how our nervous system responds on a day-to-day. This recalibration process that I teach, that is something that is possible for us to shift and control. We can't control what's going on externally, but we can control that. Just like you, Lashelle, with teaching people what you can focus on, skin health, right? Taking care of yourself. That is something that you can control. So if we shift our initial reaction from these things that maybe don't serve us, don't benefit us, the grounding, the comforting foods can be really great at first, but if it's a constant, it can be detrimental to our health, right? So making that then shift to saying, okay, what can we control? What is possible for us? While addressing the nervous system, for me, that looks like using a lot of different breath work in my day-to-day. Breathing exercises. Wim Hof is a good one to check out and to do some of his exercises. That's a really cool resource. I do breathing exercises. I started working out twice a day because once was not enough. And my second workout looked like going into my garage and dancing for half an hour. That's what that looked like to me.
I love dancing. I danced yesterday in my house. If someone saw me yesterday, they would have died. Like I was in the middle of my floor going.
Doing the worm?
No, I was doing spins, like the helicopter. I'll teach you that another time.
Oh, that sounds fun. I love it. I love to dance too. We could do a Zoom dance.
Yeah, I have no problem. No.
Dancing, dancing again, it releases those feel good neurochemicals. So if I'm dancing out in my garage, I'll come back inside my house and I'll make dinner and my husband will come out from work and I'll be like, hey, do you want to do this? You want to do this? And he's just like, you're too much. This is extra. But that
He must love you though. It must be so invigorating to have you around though. I'm sure it is.
He dances with me on occasion.
Of course. You push him out of that thing that maybe, I'm sure it helps.
Yes. Yeah. And some people, and like dancing can be really uncomfortable, just like getting a skin treatment can be uncomfortable. So, finding the things that work for you that feel good, that do increase those feel good neurochemicals, that can keep you focused. Meditating is a big one for me. Mindfulness meditation is something that I do practice, but it isn't actually something that I teach my clients because being stuck in that sympathetic dominant state with a chronic illness, it can be really hard to meditate mindfully. And so we have a different approach, but it is something that I use regularly. And then to go back to your question on the skincare routine. So having my background,
treatments or spas or anything of the like, does Lindsay bring that into her life?
Oh my gosh.
Even if you do it at home.
Yes. So, well, I'll tell you, so treatment, I don't know if you call this a treatment. I love craniosacral therapy, love acupuncture, but then yes, but when we're thinking skincare treatments, I do a lot of it at home. I'm like a big sucker for natural products just with my medical background. I just love that kind of stuff. And so what I do is I'll use a face mask. I've got like this enzyme mask and also like activated charcoal. I love activated charcoal. And I'll put that, and it's like one of those ones that you refrigerate. I'll put that on. I'll go out in my hot tub and I'll sit there. I was doing this last night, Lashelle.
That's great.
So
I love to hear that.
Yeah. And then I've got one of those brushes, those exfoliating.
Do you set a mood when you do it? Do you like create a whole mood?
It's, and like a little hack for me is doing it. So I did it last night. Last night was a Sunday night, but I usually do it on a weekday and I'll do it like in the morning. And so blocking out even 2 hours in the morning and waking up earlier and doing this, it's like a recommitment to myself that self-care is always important. It's not just an indulgence on the weekend.
Right.
It's a constant process, and it makes me feel so good when I can wake up on a Tuesday or a Wednesday and get out my exfoliation brush, put on my mask, which I do about 2 times a week, go outside, in the hot tub. I've got a big backyard as well, so it's just nice being in the outside and doing this and committing.
That sounds gorgeous.
45 minutes to it.
When I hear that in the morning, it's the same thing I do when I go run in the morning or work out in the morning. What it does is it sets an initiative in the morning. Mm-hmm. Well, at night, after a long day, it resets perspective. But what it does is it kind of recharges the spirit and soul. And I love that you do it outside because that's the ambiance that's created. I shared with the parents a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to ask you as well, have you ever done it? I taught the parents to bring it into their home as date night or create a spa-like atmosphere as best as they possibly can with each other or individually. Is that something that you and your husband do or would do, or I could suggest to bring a spa-like day in for the husband and even for your child? It's a great way to start them with self-care. If you do I call them kiddie facials, because you sort of create you start them, they see you do it and then you do it on them. And it's just a great way for them to learn. Would you do that with your husband, or is he?
I would love to hear your recommendations, but yes, we do a version of that. I'll put the mask on him and I'll put it on myself, and then we'll have the masks. And either, like give each other massages or do something like that. A good old foot massage, like basic foot massage is just so nice. He actually is very into, self-care. He's all about the massage. He gets a massage maybe, once every 2 weeks or something like that. And just being outside, and we live in Austin, Texas. We've got a creek in our backyard. Just being out there in nature and taking care of yourself in that way is just, it like does all the things, because connecting with nature can increase your feel-good neurochemicals. Doing that self-spa day can do that as well. So we love doing it together. So I love that.
And because I want people to understand how that affects. As a man, he does that for himself on his own. I'm sure that sort of initiative he takes with himself shows up in your relationship in other parts of his life. Am I right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like I could bring him in here right now and he would just tell you, because, on one hand, yes, he does do that. And then on the other hand, he has stress from work, and he will be the first one to tell you his life does not look perfect when it comes to self-care and how he manages his work stress. But because he's able to admit that, he takes initiative then, when he can on the weekend or tonight, like we're going to have date night after this, and he's making dinner, and being able to have that together. Because I think you're right in the sense that like a spa date night or a spa date day or whatever, you get that benefit, but you also get the benefit of sharing that with somebody else. And that oxytocin, when you just hug someone or touch someone, or, like when you give facials and these types of things, having that oxytocin released in both of you, because it does help everyone. So yes, it's just so important to share that with your partner. And you're so right. It does show up in other parts of his life.
I love that you guys are doing this. But one thing that you said that's important, and I'm going to ask the last question after this. Okay. You said, I create time for it. You are both professionals. You both are couples, and you are parents. And so the biggest thing that I hear first from individual men is they don't have time. And then from families, they feel like they don't have time. And I say, that's just not so. If you prioritize your time and your day right, you can make time for these things, and it does expand. It expands the rest of how you do your day and how you do your life in such a way where it doesn't change the stress dynamic entirely, but it does give you a sense of serenity in some way, right? So I love that you said, I make time for this. I have to create time for it, because I think that's important to understand that you have to create time for this. Spa day at the house, skin regimens, I believe, takes about 3 to 5 minutes when you know what you're doing. But spa days and date nights, you have to create time for it. And I try to educate my guys mostly on, hey guys, create time for this. Create time for this. So my last question to you is, what are some of the signs that some people can look for when it's time, especially dealing with stress, anxiety? What are some of the signs that they can look for when they know they need to come to someone like yourself? Yeah.
That's totally valid question.
Try to make it all big, but no, it's fine.
That's simple. I love simple. Simple is great. I try to make.
I'm not that simple, Lindsay.
You're complex, but you can be simple. It's a good question, because especially with 2020, I've had a lot of people come to me and they're like, I think that I'm someone that can benefit from your work, but I don't know. So first of all, it's important to acknowledge right now, we're in November, so it's been a little bit since the pandemic has been announced. But in addition to that, we've had so many other huge things in our lives take place. So if you're feeling that heightened stress and heightened anxiety right now, I'll be the first one to tell you that's normal. We're all experiencing it a little bit. to some degree, and everyone's different when it comes to that. So you can use tools like the ones that I talked about that I use, or, even techniques that you use and that you have people do, these self-care techniques. But I'll take that one step further. So if it hasn't only been 8 months, but it's also been prior to that, you had sort of constant anxiety, you were hypervigilant. A lot of times people call themselves empaths, but they also have food sensitivities, hypervigilance, hyperawareness. And although you may be an empath, but what also could be going on is that sympathetic dominant survival response is taking over. So these are kind of common symptoms that you can think of. This has been going on for 6 months to over a year. Maybe you have been given a diagnosis like, mold toxicity or fibromyalgia or chronic pain, these types of conditions. And maybe you've tried a lot of different treatments, but still feel stuck, or feel like maybe you're too sensitive for the next treatment, or maybe you've gone through a traumatic event, whether that's chemotherapy or cancer treatment, or another, traumatic event that, of course, has left you feeling depleted and stressed and anxious, or maybe even the opposite of the fight flight, which is the freeze, which is another survival response where you can feel hopeless and sad and even feel like you're dissociated. So these things, it's important to understand. They're not you. You're not an anxious person or a depressed person. It can be your nervous system responding. And so if you're feeling that today, it's worth sitting down with a pen and paper and differentiating your nervous system's response from your personality, which are two very different things. And if you can start to identify that a lot of these hyperinflammatory, hypervigilant, reactive symptoms are your nervous system responding, to me, that's like really great information, because we can do something about that. We can make a change. We can shift that. And we can go through these techniques together. And so if you have any specific questions, I do offer initial consults where we can talk about your story and figure out if this is a nervous system issue, if you are living in sympathetic dominance, and then what we can do about it.
Okay, great. Well, you're segueing me to asking, can you just tell us how we can get in touch with you and where to find you, just so that people seeing this can locate you? Because I personally, I'm doing so much recovery right now. I still am open to wanting to know as much as I possibly can about this thing up here and how to move it, because it's complex, as we just realized. Can you tell us where to find you, Lindsay?
Sure. Yes, you can find me on Instagram at My Vital Side. And I have a lot of great free content on there and quick exercises, mental exercises like the ones I talked about earlier. And you can also research my virtual programs, my one-on-one sessions, consults, things like that on my website. And that's vital-side.com.
I just want to say I'm really, really thankful that you came on today and that you put boots to ground with this conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to replay this again and really look at some of the things you were saying. And I think it's just great what we're doing now, or what people like ourselves are doing, professionals like ourselves are doing, is so needed. And I just want to continually be of service to as many people as I possibly can. And I just wish you well. And thank you so much, Lindsay.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. That beautiful smile.
Right. You too. I love it. It brings a smile to my face.
I know, me too. So thank you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Okay? Awesome. Okay. Yes. We'll be in touch.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye, Lashelle.
Bye-bye, honey.